Hello again. It's Rob Ryder. Tuesday, August 27th, I believe it is, 2013. Back to looking for the civil authority. So here's a organizational chart of the state of Michigan. Now, let's just take a quick look at the top. So here's the Michigan electorate. Well, who are they? Right. First of all, you notice almost all this stuff is in uppercase. So, this is the de facto government, it looks like. And you got a state legislator, governor, state judiciary. The legislature and the judiciary aren't touching anything. The governor is, and it goes to an executive office. And it says elected single executive. And then over here we got State Board of Education, and that's the elected board. So it just seems to me like the executive officer, the elected single executive that goes in this executive office, is the president of the State Board of Education. Because when you elect a board, normally what they do then is they elect one of themselves to be the president. So he was elected. So whoever the state board elected as the single elected executive is sitting in the executive office. That's pretty strange, ain't it? I don't do that yet, but that's what this flowchart seems to be showing us, that there's the governor. So it's not the executive office, and in that executive office an elected single executive, but the governor's sitting here, so it's not the governor. But we have an elected board, and when boards get together they elect one of themselves as the president of the board, and they become the chief executive of the board, and there's the executive office. Who's ever the elected top nut of the State Board of Education is going to sit in the executive office. It looks like. Here's the address for the executive office of the governor. Right? 111 South Capitol Avenue, da-da-da. So if I was going to send some of these people, I would just put it, I guess I would put it to, what do they call this thing? Can we just use this? Maybe State of Michigan Governor, care of the Executive Office of the Governor, 111 South Capitol Avenue, right? State of Michigan being proper case, State of Michigan Governor, care of Executive Office of the Governor. As we get done here, we'll have a complaint that is an idea to send out, because this is really more about the emergency managers at a local level, but they're supposed to answer to somebody in the state. And this is just the strangest thing, right? Elected single executive sitting in this office who's not the governor, with an elected board, State Board of Education, when they get together would elect one of themselves to be the president, and he would sit in the executive office. And it says in Michigan, in the on that shit they read about Michigan, the Michigan compiled laws, that a school district can be considered as a local government entity. I'm trying to think of the word, like a municipality. It's its own municipality. So it's a political subdivision. That's what I'm looking for. It's a recognized political subdivision in Michigan. The school districts are. All right, so we may not find any help at the state level, because this looks like it's all the uppercase state, the de facto state. We may have to go federal. And that's why we're talking about the emergency manager. So what is federal? It's pertaining to the national government of the United States. All of our consistent government in which power is distributed between a central authority and a number of constituent territorial units. Right? Lowercase states. See also federal government. Federal acts are statutes enacted by Congress. Federal crimes are those acts, so federal acts that have been made criminal by federal law. This is interesting. There are no federal common law crimes. And when you really look at Title 18, there isn't any common law crimes in there. Those are all ecclesiastic. They're getting you for things like perjury, which is lying, It's lie, cheat, and steal. It's breaking the Ten Commandments. It's all based around that. And mainly they try to get you for perjury, which is, just lying, basically. Although they've led you into it, which makes them guilty of perjury. And most of them are codified in Title 18. So one thing we could do is bring a federal crime like 18 U.S.C. 1342, which is using the mail for fraud, and 18 U.S.C. 1341, which is fraud and swindles, because they have mailed mail to a fictitious entity, and that's fraud. Now, people have tried to take this to in fact, I have myself tried to take it to the postal inspectors, and they don't do anything with it. You never hear from them, right? So, we need to go to the chief executive to have a law executed, and so we would take this complaint, maybe based on this simple thing, take the envelope in, say this is fraud. It was mailed to a fictitious entity, see, 18 U.S.C. 1342. And they're doing it for fraud, which makes 18 U.S.C. 1341 go into effect. Go execute the laws. Federal instrumentality, a government agency immune from state control. We got to find one of those. Federal preemption. Federal government's exclusive power over certain matters such as interstate commerce and sedition, which is the same thing as saying insurrection. Occurs where the federal law so occupies the field that state courts are prevented from asserting jurisdiction. And so we need to get the state court so they can't assert any jurisdiction, because the state courts have been usurped. Right? So we're looking for superintending control from the federal government over the corrupt state courts that are run by de facto officers. Administrative, superintending, directing or superintending the execution. There you go, right? They can superintend the courts to make sure they execute justice and not this pagan religion's frickin' Masonic developed law system that we're dealing with. In this sense, administrative functions or acts are distinguished from such as our judicial, right? So we're not going to the judicial branch, we're going to the administrative branch, because they have things particularly having the character of executive or ministerial action, and we're trying to get things executed. Administrative acts, those acts which are necessary to be done and carry out legislative policy. Okay, administrative adjudication, administrative officer, an officer of the executive department, distinguished from a judicial officer. They're not fucking judges, right? We need somebody from the executive department. Administrative authority, the power of an agency or its head to carry out terms of law creating the agency, as well as to make regulations for the conduct of business before the agency, distinguished from legislative authority to make laws. Administrative crime, an offense consisting of a violation of an administrative rule or regulation carrying with it criminal sanction. Well, that would be like not following the frickin' civil procedures in court, not putting in a sworn complaint. Labor Code's kind of interesting. It's going to come into this because during a state of national emergency, which apparently the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 has put us into again, the Labor Code, Executive Order 100, is still in full effect. And this act, this Labor Code says, the place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of that occupation under the martial law of the invading, occupying army. That's the all caps, right? We're occupied by an enemy called the all caps state, right? It usurped the power of the de jure state. But because we've been occupied, we're already under the martial law of all caps, which is why you can't find justice in those courtrooms. Whether any proclamation, declaration declaring martial law or any other public warning to its inhabitants has been issued or not. Doesn't matter if they told you, that's what happened. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. Right, so Michigan, all caps Michigan National Guard, right? That's the army. So it proclaimed its martial law. Martial law in a hostile country consist in the suspension by the occupying military of the criminal and civil law. They suspended the de jure law system of criminal and civil law. That's why they don't use the penal code anymore. The commander of the forces may proclaim that the administration of all civil and penal codes shall continue, either wholly or in part, as in times of peace, unless otherwise ordered by military authority. So unless they change their mind, they can use them. They can use them when they want and turn them off when they want. This is the hostile country doing this. All caps. All civil and penal law shall continue to take its usual course in the enemy's places and territories under martial law, unless interrupted or stopped by order of the occupying military power. But all the functions of the hostile government, legislative, executive, administrative, whether of a general, provincial, or local character, cease under martial law, or continue only with the sanction or deemed necessary the participation of the occupier or invader. But all the functions of the hostile government cease under martial law, or continue only with the sanction of, if deemed necessary, the participation of the occupier or invader. Well, something's going on there, right? It sounds like the functions of the hostile government are supposed to stop unless it's deemed necessary by the occupier. Well, if he deems it necessary, he's going to enforce his legislative, executive, administrative functions. Military jurisdiction is two kinds. First, that's conferred to and defined by statute. Military offenses under the statute must be tried in a manner therein directed, but military offenses which do not come within the statute must be tried and punished under common law of war. Gold fringe flags. The salaries of civil officers of the hostile government of all caps who remain in the invaded territory de jure and continue the work of their office and can continue it according to the circumstances arising out of war, such as judges, administrative, police, officers, city, right? So the hostile government of all caps can keep their people in place, and they're paid by the public revenues of the invaded territory. And so we're going to pay for them to be here, for them to be our invaders. However, neither officers nor soldiers are allowed to make use of their position of power in the hostile country for private gain, not even for commercial transactions otherwise legitimate. Offenses to the contrary committed by commissioned officers will be punished with cashiering or such other punishment as nature of the offense may require. If by soldiers, they shall be punished according to the nature of the offense. Right? They're not talking military officers, they're covered in soldiers. Military officers are soldiers. Everyone who's in the army is a soldier. These officers are those civil officers they're talking about of the hostile government. And they're not allowed to use their office for private gain. Right? Well, you can find numerous places where, Ro's an expert at this, where I should get this certificate for $5. But when I go to get the certificate, they really don't want to give it to me, number one, and when they do, it's $40 or some other number other than what it says in the statute. Well, that's somebody using their office for private gain. Think of the thousands of transactions that go on through there yearly. It's not a bad gig if you can get it. Now, so in Arizona, they have Title 26, Military Affairs and Emergency Management. Division of Emergency Management. There is established in the Department of Emergency and Military Affairs the Division of Military Management. So this emergency management is under military affairs. It's to reduce the impact of disaster on persons or property. Through the powers vested in the governor, the division shall coordinate the cooperative effort of all government agencies, including the federal government, this state and its political subdivisions, to alleviate suffering and loss resulting from disaster. So the emergency manager can call out the federal government. Powers to be the state director for the emergency management. Develop and test plans for meeting any condition constituting a state of emergency or state of war emergency, except Those emergency plans specifically assigned by the governor to other state agencies, such plans shall provide for an effective mobilization and management of personnel and equipment of the state. In other words, they're going to have a way to take superintending control. During the state of war emergency, coordinate the emergency activities of all state agencies except the National Guard, and just during a state of emergency or a local emergency, coordinate the emergency activities of all state agencies and the National Guard. And we have a state of emergency, so they can call up the National Guard. Let me show you what happened in Michigan. I'm sure if everybody were to look closely at your Constitution, you may find something similar. I'm not saying where it will be, but this is under Article 7, Local Government, Section 7, Board of Supervisors. And this is talking about for townships. Okay? But right in the footnotes it says constitutionality. Section held invalid under federal Constitution. Section held invalid under federal Constitution. Well, that to me makes it sound like it's federally unconstitutional to do whatever has happened in this subsection by the footnotes. And what they did is they took the township, which is a surveyed area, 6 by 6, and it used to be the smallest subdivision of the state, and instead they created these districts within the county which are sized by inhabitants, so that each one of them has about the same number of people. So a board of supervisors shall establish in each organized county consisting of one member from each organized township and such representation from cities as provided by law. That isn't who makes up the board of supervisors, because it isn't done by township. It's done by these districts. And that made this section of the Constitution of Michigan unconstitutional by federal law. So the state of Michigan, all caps Michigan, the de facto, has invaded the proper case Michigan de jure and created the state constitution that is warring with the federal Constitution, making the government of Michigan, right, the de facto, is a hostile foreign power causing an insurrection within the nation. Because they made a section of the Constitution unconstitutional. So, we're in a state of emergency, man. It's time to bring in the feds. And what do they have to bring to us? Well, they got a thing called the Defense Support of Civil Authorities. It's the current process by which United States military assets and personnel can be used to assist missions normally carried out by civil authorities. And the missions have included man-made disasters, and that's what we're suffering through. This disaster we're living through is man-made. God had nothing to do with it. Right? They that run the system say God has nothing to do with the earth, and they made the system. It's a man-made disaster. The Directorate of Military Support for the domestic operations located inside the state's Joint Operations Center. So the Directorate of Military Support is within the state's Joint Operations Center. Normal course of action of the Office of Emergency Management within the state to request military support. Okay, so they have a normal course of action which the Office of Emergency Management within a state can request. We're talking, federal military support here. Their authority comes from Directive 3025-18. The directive defines that in response to requests or assistance from civil authorities, domestic emergencies, that's what we have. Designated law enforcement support, we're going to need that because they're going to have to take over the courts. Other domestic activities, returning my property. That's just some of them. But there are numerous other directives, policies, and laws that shape the military's role in conducting operations in support of the federal agencies. Some of them are the Insurrection Act, I like that one, Homeland Security, Stafford Economy Act. When federal forces deploy, support of DSCA, once those forces enter the incident area, they come under the operation of the U.S. Northern Command. The The military is always in the supporting role, never the lead, right? Because the military they answer to the civil authority. Now, an interesting thing is, Jeff in Washington on Friday, I think it was, he talked to the emergency manager of his county, and she said, yes, I am the civil authority. And then he asked her if she was the provost marshal, and she said she wasn't. Maybe she isn't, right? Maybe she's the provost sergeant. As we'll see. Anyway, so all incidents are controlled at the lowest civilian levels, with the military filling in critical roles. So the lowest civilian level is depending on whoever the emergency manager is within the jurisdiction you're talking about. And, it just goes uphill from there. All federal agencies can request military assistance by using a simple memo format that contains specific information on what capability is needed, and also give cost reimbursement guidelines. Right, so they got a system for doing it. So on the civilian side, FEMA is the main federal responder when a disaster overwhelms a state. When a state exhausts all its resources or is lacking a unique capability during a disaster, so in this man-made disaster, what's the unique capability that we've lacking? That would be called justice. We're looking for justice. And FEMA, one of their options is to turn to the military. All other state, local, federal resources must be exhausted prior to the military, but everything goes through FEMA. Request of the military to respond to a disaster, man-made or natural, is done through formal process established by FEMA and the Department of Defense. And this started back with the Whiskey Rebellion. And then the Posse Comitatus Act came in that said prohibited the use of active duty military in Title 10, enforcing civil law and order unless directed by the President. Unless directed by the President. And when can the President direct things? When there's a state of emergency, because he can write executive orders. He is directing. But the PCA does not, the Posse Comitatus Act does not apply to the United States National Guard in their state support role. The Insurrection Act 1807 is a set of laws that govern the ability of the President of the United States to deploy troops to the United States to put down lawlessness, insurrection, and rebellion. The laws are chiefly contained in 10 U.S.C. 331 to 335. The general aim is to limit presidential power of such as much as possible, relying on state and local governments for initial response in the event of a resurrection. But there is no state or local government. They've been usurped. If we can't get the county executive manager to do this, or the county executive to take care of the problem, it's just an indication that there is no justice in the state, and we have every right to go to emergency management and call out the insurrection. And in 2006, Insurrection Act widened the President's ability to deploy troops in the United States to enforce the laws. What laws? So, if you want to read this, 10 U.S.C. 1331 through 35, the one that means the most to me. This one here. The President, by using the militia or the armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it so hinders the execution of laws of the state and the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the constituted authorities of the state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or to give that protection, or oppose or obstruct the execution of the laws of the United States, or impede the course of justice under those laws. Impede the course of justice under those laws. In any situation covered in Clause 1, the state shall be considered to have denied the equal protection of the laws secured by the Constitution. Insurrection within your state. Call it what it is and go give it to the emergency manager. Whenever the President considers necessary to use militia or the armed forces, he shall by proclamation immediately order the insurgents to disperse and retire peaceably to their abodes within a limited time. Get your ass back in your house. And while this isn't directly, it may be indirectly involved, because now what if the national government can't do it? Right? What if we go to this emergency manager and they don't do it? Oh my God, what then? It's a good question to ask. What are we going to do then? Well, they have the thing called the International Criminal Court. It's a permanent tribunal to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, crimes of aggression, yada, yada, yada. Crimes against humanity, right? That would be enslavement. This is the court that the Vatican's going to use, the International Criminal Court. It was created by Rome statute. The court was established itself in The Hague, but its proceedings may take place anywhere. May only exercise its jurisdiction only when national courts are unwilling or unable to investigate or prosecute such crimes, right? So we couldn't get it local. We can't get it at the state. If we can't get it at the nation, well, we can take it to the ICC. Because all these people doing these things are citizens of the Holy See, because they have dual citizenship. If we have it, they have it. And if you're baptized, you volunteered to have citizenship within the Holy See. But if you belong to a secret society like the Freemasons, well, then you were, by the Holy See, excommunicated ipso facto by the fact that you signed the damn book. You're excommunicated. And we're going to take their ass here and just have a memorial to the event of their excommunication entered into the book, so that they're going to turn off all their accounts, give them a fine, 100%. They won't exist anymore. You're going to use the ICC, but that's more to do with the Pope stuff. What would the next thing be if we go to the emergency manager and don't get any traction? Well, September 1st, courts open at the ICC. And it doesn't matter that the United States hasn't signed this, right? The Vatican signed it. And all these people that are baptized are citizens of the Vatican. And yeah, they're all under that guy called the Pope. You betcha. Would you rather answer to the Pope directly or to the cop on the side of the road? What the fuck is wrong with people, right? You really want to answer to the cop on the side of the road who has summary judgment power? He may just decide to shoot you, have a summary execution because you wouldn't hand over your ID. Yeah, go ahead, stay right here in that system. They'd love to have you. All right, what was next? Okay. The Provost Marshal. Officer of the Armed Forces who is charged with military police. May be a Provost Marshal serving at many levels of the hierarchy, and may also be the public safety officer of any military installation. Public safety officer responsible for provision of fire, gate security, ambulance service, as well as law enforcement. EMS trucks going down, emergency manager service. Right? That's the function of the Provost Marshal. Right? So I think while they may not be a Provost Marshal, they're a Provost Sergeant. But somewhere there is a Provost Marshal that they answer to. It's just a chain of command. The senior MP officer at the theater, corps, division, or brigade level, and for each garrison is known as a Provost Marshal. All right, so what the hell's a garrison? Theater, corps, division, brigade, garrison. In many U.S. Army garrisons, a Provost Marshal is at times also responsible for provisions of fire and physical security as well as law enforcement services, and thus is also referred to as the Director of Emergency Services. So whoever the Director of Emergency Services is the Provost Marshal. What is a garrison? Garrison town is a common expression of any town that has a military base nearby. How many people have some kind of military base close to them? Right? Is a post office a military base? That makes it a garrison town. The Arabs had garrison towns. They were used during the Islamic conquest of the Middle Eastern lands. Armies to increase the dominance over the indigenous population in order to occupy non-Arab, non-Islamic areas, Nomadic Arab tribesmen were taken from the desert by the ruling Arab elite, conscripted into Islamic armies, and settled into garrison towns, as well as given a share of the spoils of war. It's really interesting when you become a Shriner in the secret society known as the Masons, you swear to Allah on the Quran. I believe that those are, the Arab tribesmen. The primary utility of the Arab Islamic garrison was to control the indigenous non-Arab peoples of these conquered and occupied territories, and to serve as garrison base to launch further Islamic military campaigns into yet undominated lands. Maybe that's the insurrection, is right, the Arab Islamic garrison. That would be called the Masonic Temple. A secondary aspect of the Arab Islamic garrison was the uprooting of aforesaid nomadic Arab tribesmen from the original home regions in order to proactively avert these tribal peoples, and particularly the young men, from revolting against Islamic State established in their midst. Isn't that what happened in Israel, right? We lost 10 tribes because basically the Arabs came in and displaced them and put their own people in and sent them somewhere else. The British and Irish, they got garrisons too. Any major military station, such as London, right? That's a garrison. In Ireland, association football, which is soccer, has historically been termed as a garrison game or the garrison sport for the connection of the British military serving in Irish cities and towns. All right, so any place you got a association football, all right, they're going to say it's a garrison town. The Israelis got a garrison too. Ain't that wonderful? So we got Islam, the Brits, and the Israelis using garrison towns. Is a regular unit defending a specified Israeli zone in need of protection from attack from combatants. Israel garrison units placed in disputed territories are recognized as occupied pending peaceful recognition by all regional combatants. Right? So they just take their people and they put them in disputed territory and say, well, it's our property now. Right? They're never happy what the border is. Wherever the border is, they want another 100 feet. We want to that river. We need farther. It's just the way the Greeks were. It's no wonder that's the way that the false Jews are. Ancient Rome had them too. It was an old custom in ancient Italy to send out colonies for the purpose of securing new conquest. The Romans, having no standing army, used to plant bodies of their own citizens in conquered towns as a kind of garrison. So in garrison towns where troops are stationed, usually to defend, but sometimes prestige regions, as in capital cities. So capital cities are garrison towns. Yada yada yada. That's the interesting thing. In Montreal, for instance, it was the soldiers of the garrison who introduced rowing on the St. Lawrence. They encouraged fencing, curling, cricket, hockey, and steeplechase. They patronized Masonic and Orange lodges. They were heretics, and they built the first Presbyterian and Anglican churches. Heretics building churches. Masons building churches. Look at that. And they helped develop the early Montreal police force. They came in and set the system up. A bunch of heretics. Claiming to be Christians, members of secret societies in which they put a curse upon themselves that they should tell their brother's secrets, and that gives up all their supernatural protection from God, and they're just Satan's plaything now. And that's why that poor bastard priest who became a Mason thinks that even though he was excommunicated for being a Mason, and he was told numerous times, look, you can stay a priest, you can't be a Mason, right? Here's your choice. Make one. He decided, no, I can do it on my own time. Even though there's 20, 25 papal bulls that say if you're a Catholic, you cannot be a member of a Mason organization, and if you are, you're excommunicated. Well, they finally excommunicated him. Well, he's going to walk to Rome, 560 miles, 40 miles, and tell the Pope that he's wrong and, that he wants back in, that he can still be a Mason. That's how freaking sick in the head the dude is. That's what he excommunicated you for, brother. You think you're going to walk there and you're going to change the Pope's mind? Ooh. Hey, you've been drinking that Kool-Aid. Provost, ceremony ahead of many Scottish local authorities. The title developed in France, where it found its way to the Scots, where in Scotland it became a style of provost of the principal magistrates of the royal burbs, roughly speaking the equivalent of a mayor in the rest of the UK, right? So the equivalent to a mayor is a provost. A provost officer is a officer in the army originally appointed where troops are to serve abroad, and now in the United Kingdom as well, for the prompt repression of all offenses. A provost sergeant is in charge of the garrison police or regimental police. And that's why I think the emergency manager just could be a provost sergeant. The provost also refers to military police in general. The army pronunciation is provo. Historically, the provo was the chief magistrate or convener, right? Chief magistrate. And so, just more about why I think that we could say they're the provost marshal, but we don't need to say they are. We're, just so that we know kind of how things fit together. The royal provost, who were the lowest royal judicial officers of the land. And because of the Magna Carta, which was the constitution of the Jewry between the Jews and King John II, and some of his grandfather, his father, him, and I think the guy that followed him, they all made these deals with the Jews and basically made the Jews their property. And once the Jews became the property of the king, they could only be tried by the king's officer. And so we're looking for the royal judicial officer, the king's officer, because he's the only one that we as a Christian can take our complaint to against a Jew because of the deal the king made with the Jews back in 1215. If you didn't know, the Magna Carta is the constitution of the Jewry. So says the Jewish Review. Provost's position initiated was styled after corresponding ecclesiastic office of cathedral chapters. Right, so they look the same, but they're not quite the same. Royal provostships were double-faceted. First, provosts were entrusted to carry out local royal power, including the collection of the crown's dominial revenues and all taxes and duties owed to the king within the provincial, the provost's jurisdiction. So he's also there to collect the taxes. In the 12th century, the office of provost was put up for bidding, and thereafter provosts were farmers of revenue. Somebody's farming our estate. The provost is sending all the shit back to the king. Right? That's what's happening. Unfortunately, some of the things we're talking about here with the provost marshal have to do with the invading army's provost marshal. He ain't working for us. He's collecting revenue for the king. Right? He bought the position. He bought the office. When appeals were instituted by the crown, appeal of provost's judgment formerly impossible now lay with the baillie. Right? So you could appeal. Originally they were assigned to judge crimes committed by people in the army. That would make sense. Provosts were required to keep a certain number of ordinary judges or masters. What's an ordinary judge? An ordinary judge is somebody who's got ecclesiastic power. Presidial judge had concurrent jurisdiction with provost marshal, and the two vied openly to be vested. So we're going into a judge got some kind of ordinary power. It's delegated ordinary power. Right? Judicial ordinary power, still the power of the ordinary to judge. That's those judges we walk into. Well, we want to go see the provost. Because the judges that are in there are using their office for private gain, and they're allowing they're not following the civil procedures of the state, and all sorts of things. We'll get to that in just a second. So this here is just, I'll send this along. Maybe. Come on, baby. This is called the use of federal troops for disaster assistance legal issues. And I just like to do it this way so I can just highlight the parts I want. Divide the control of military between the President and Congress, and to share control of the military with the states. The clauses do not expressly limit the Congress to how, when, or where it might employ the armed forces. Congress is also empowered to provide for calling forth militia to execute federal law and to suppress insurrections. Once the army is raised or the militia called forth, the President serves as the commander-in-chief. And of course, the President is vested with the responsibility to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. It's all fallen on the President's shoulders now because he's sitting there as the Commander-in-Chief. Under the Constitution, states retain primary responsibility and authority to provide for civil order and protection of their citizens' lives and property, but they're not doing that. However, the Constitution provides the federal government is responsible for protecting the state against invasion and insurrection, and if the state legislature or governor, if the legislature cannot be convened, requested protection against domestic violence. That's why there's one dude sitting in that office. You've got one lone de jure officer. The Constitution does not explicitly bar the use of military force in civilian situations as a matter of law enforcement. The United States has traditionally refrained from employing troops to enforce law except in cases of necessity, so they will do it. Posse Comitatus, the Act does not apply to the Navy or Marines. The Act does not apply to the National Guard. Congress has delegated authority to the President to call forth military during insurrection and civil disturbances, which we've talked about, to protect states against domestic violence, which we're going through. 322 authorizes him to determine that unlawful obstructions, combinations, assemblages, or rebellion against authority of the United States make it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States and to use armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce the law or suppress the rebellion. Permits the President to use 333 to suppress any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if law enforcement is hindered within the state and local law enforcement is unable to protect individuals, or if the unlawful action obstructs the execution of laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. We love Section 333. 10 U.S.C. 333. Requires implement the 14th Amendment and does not require the request or even the permission of the governor to invoke Section 333. Beautiful. The Department of Defense regulations assert another exception that does not rest on statutory authority, but is available in very limited circumstances, covers actions that are taken under an inherent right of the U.S. government to ensure the preservation of public order and carry out the governmental operations within its territorial limits to take superintending control. The emergency powers, according to DoD directives, available to protect property, functions, and authorize prompt and vigorous federal action, including the use of military forces, to prevent loss of life or wanton destruction of property, and to restore governmental functions and public order when sudden and unexpected civil disturbances, yada, 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 they can come in and just take over. But DoD officials and military commanders may take emergency action. If duly constituted local authorities, like the county executive, are unable to control the situation, any circumstance preclude pertaining prior authorization for the President. They don't need to go to the President. They have the authority. We've got the Stafford Act, that if a state is stricken by a man-made disaster, the current state of affairs, it provides statutory authority for employing the U.S. Armed Forces for domestic disaster relief. stuff. So, in a nutshell, because we got this thing here with a governor, got an executive office with little thing here says elected single executive. Elected from where? Elected from this board. And on this board, they're going to elect a president who's going to go sit in this executive office. Looks like to me. Makes them the governor. This is actually the de jure governor, and this dude here is de facto. And that was the address. Okay, so what are we going to do with all this? Well, here was an idea. Just a short complaint. It's not done yet. I'm just trying to put this out again to get the information out and let other people think about it. Emergency manager for the county of, whatever county you're in. By virtue of your office establishing you as the local representative of the civil authority, the fact that the United States of America is under a state of emergency, and denial of my guaranteed equal protection, I make your conscience and office aware of violations of the Insurrection Act, Labor Code, Stafford Act, and general warring with the federal Constitution by insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy within the territorial limits of your jurisdiction. 10 U.S.C. 333, interference with state and federal law. The President, by using the militia or the armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it hinders the execution of the laws of the state and the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the constituted authorities of the state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or to give protection, or opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States, or impedes the course of justice under those laws, impedes the course of justice under those laws, and any that would be simulating a legal process, would be impeding justice. In any situation covered by Clause 1, the state shall be considered to have denied equal protection of the laws secured by the Constitution and would just come in and take over. The Labor Code. Article 46. Neither officers nor soldiers are allowed to make or use their position or power in a hostile country for private gain, not even for commercial transactions otherwise legitimate. Offenses to the contrary committed by commissioned officers will be punished by cashiering or such other punishment as the nature of the offense may require. If by soldiers, they shall be punished according to the nature of the offense. So, actors assuming authority as officers of the state, courts, county, local councils within your jurisdiction, not having subscribed the constitutionally mandated oath of office or filed an acceptance of office, have usurped said office and conspire with members of secret societies by use of simulated legal process to perpetrate the enslavement of the people of God. Evidence of this conspiracy can be found in, put your court case number here. All right, you may want to put the address. You can put on there whatever you want. Number 1, the plaintiff is a fictitious entity not having license to do business within the state. Right, there's no certificate of existence either. I'd probably put that there. And there appears to be no certificate of existence for said entity. Number 2, defendant is a fictitious legal person, business, of which I am its rightful proprietor, entitled to both its legal and equitable title, and I have not received proper notice of any legal proceeding. Attorney of record, number 3, for plaintiff has brought fraud upon the court by blatant disregard of the rules of civil or criminal procedure, doesn't matter which one. Right, there's no sworn complaint against you, can't be a criminal case anyways. Because number 4, there is no sworn complaint against myself for any unlawful behavior. 5, there are no judicial seals or original charging instruments. Your investigation will prove that lawless rabble has usurped the powers of the state, making it impossible for the people of God to find justice, and it is your sworn duty, by use of federal troops if necessary, to squash the rebellion, restore justice, property rights, and the king's peace. The man-made disaster of corrupt officials or officers and their silent partners is to be immediately mitigated by use of superintending control and immediate cessation of hostile activity by these traitors to the Constitution. By international law, you are ordered to secure all membership lists of secret societies within your territorial jurisdiction, and see that they are delivered to the Holy See, Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, so that any claiming to be Christian found to be members of these societies have their ipso facto by the fact excommunication from the Church of God properly memorialized. We need to have the record. We need to know they're a heretic. We need to be cast out of the Garden of Eden and, take their property and let them go wander the desert. Maybe they'll walk 540 miles to tell the Pope he's not correct. And as God is my witness, I swear to everything I have written in this petition as true and correct. Date it. However you think you should do that. That part is up to you. But that's just an idea of, what you might use as a short complaint, using your particular case as the evidence. Instead of complaining about the case, you're complaining about the government, or lack of government, lack of justice. That's what you're complaining about, and your case is the evidence of that. So that's what I had to say on that. Emergency manager, point out the insurrection. Plenty of things you could pick, that are seem to exist that we could pick on. So I'm going to leave it up to anybody else to decide what they want to use. But to the guy over the emergency management system, he's the executive officer that we need to go, because he has jurisdiction in the federal realm, and he can exercise his powers and stop unconstitutional behavior. That's the way it's written. We'll see what they do. That's why I'm still going to the church. I don't know if they will or not, but it seems to be the place to go next. All right. I'll talk to you later.